confidential FIA images just leaked and they reveal Oscar Piastri's 2026 McLaren in full detail. What those photos show? Radical components no team was supposed to reveal until next year. McLaren insiders are scrambling. Engineers are panicking. And the FIA is already investigating. If this leak is real, McLaren's entire 2026 strategy may have just been exposed. Subscribe right now because what you're about to see could reshape the entire Formula One grid before 2026 even begins. The Formula One world woke up to a digital shock. Several high-resolution technical images, stamped with confidential FIA metadata, began circulating online, and every one of them pointed directly at McLaren's 2026 prototype. These were not grainy renders or speculative leaks. They were official, lab-quality documents, complete with aerodynamic overlays, structural annotations, and powertrain packaging details. For a car that isn't scheduled to debut publicly until the next calendar year, the fallout was immediate and potentially devastating. Within hours, engineers across the grid began dissecting every pixel. What stood out wasn't just that the images were real, it was what they revealed. McLaren's 2026 concept appears to feature a double-deck floor architecture, narrow lateral cooling tunnels, and a visibly offset battery casing placement. These aren't just design details. They represent months of proprietary simulation work, structural R&D, and risk-based innovation that teams guard like state secrets. The fact that this was exposed in such detail has set off alarms at every level. Internally, McLaren has gone into full containment mode. A strict data lockdown was issued within the hour, and senior technical personnel were pulled from ongoing development meetings to address potential breach points. FIA compliance officers have reportedly contacted the team to initiate a private inquiry not just into how the leak happened, but into whether any component within the leaked designs violates the 2026 regulatory framework. Because if it does, this isn't just a PR crisis, it could become a competitive penalty. The FIA's concern is layered. On the surface, it's about intellectual property security, ensuring that sensitive materials aren't leaking into public domains or into the hands of rivals. But below that, it's about enforcement optics. If a team is seen to be building a car that pushes the boundaries of legality, and that design goes public prematurely, the FIA must respond. It cannot afford the appearance of ignoring potential rule-breaking even if the leak wasn't the team's fault. What makes this situation so volatile is the timing. All teams are now in the most sensitive stretch of development, the final months before homologation deadlines lock in core structural elements. If McLaren is forced to publicly revise its concept, or worse, abandon elements revealed in the leak, it could lose critical weeks of integration testing and CFD calibration. In modern Formula One, that kind of disruption can erase months of lead time, and in a season with sweeping regulatory resets, every hour counts. Then there's the driver reaction. Oscar Piastri, whose name is directly tied to the prototype project in internal McLaren planning documents, is reportedly furious. Not because of the technical exposure, but because the design shown in the leak differs from the baseline he tested in McLaren simulator just 2 weeks ago. That suggests two things: either the car evolved without full communication to the driver group, or the leaked version was never supposed to be the final spec. Both options reflect serious internal misalignment. As of now, the paddock is in full watch mode. Rival teams will be analyzing those images frame by frame. The FIA is asking questions. Fans are demanding answers. And inside Woking, the pressure is stacking up. Because in Formula One, leaking the car is bad. Leaking the wrong version? That's far worse. It could undermine the entire foundation of McLaren's 2026 campaign before the car ever turns a wheel. The first thing that caught the attention of analysts was McLaren's use of an asymmetrical cooling layout. The leaked technical schematic shows the left side pod housing a significantly narrower cooling duct, while the right includes a deeper cavity with visible energy store venting. This split design suggests that McLaren is attempting to manage thermal loads independently per side, a bold move that can optimize hybrid cooling under dynamic cornering loads but also complicates aerodynamic balance. If the FIA suspects any element of passive-active aero intent here, scrutiny will follow. Just beneath the floor line, the leaked images reveal an innovative multi-layer underfloor diffuser structure. What sets it apart is a secondary channel mounted closer to the edge of the plank, potentially directing airflow into a tertiary vortex chamber ahead of the rear diffuser. If real, this could be McLaren's answer to replacing lost ground effect under the new 2026 floor limitations. But according to several aero consultants, this geometry may fall dangerously close to exploiting gray zones in the FIA's ride height enforcement tolerances. The front suspension layout also raised eyebrows. While many teams are expected to run a pushrod configuration in 2026 to allow tighter front-end aero packaging, McLaren appears to be committing to a pull-rod setup with the added twist of a cantilevered spring damper assembly positioned closer to the wheel hub. This would allow for more aggressive dive control under braking and better control of pitch transitions during energy deployment. However, it also reduces the margin for tuning error, which could explain some of the braking instability reported by Piastri in prior simulations. Perhaps the most controversial aspect of the leak is the positioning of the battery housing. The images show the energy store mounted in a slightly elevated central spine raised above the traditional floor-mounted enclosure. The rationale is likely thermal isolation, improving cooling flow above and below the unit. But this introduces a higher center of gravity and a potential non-compliance risk under frontal impact load testing. The FIA will want to see how this configuration passes the new 2026 dynamic load thresholds, especially in rollover and side crash scenarios. From a software and electrical standpoint, a critical detail emerges in the form of multi-layered override logic boxes positioned at the base of the control electronics housing. These appear to be custom-built modules designed to separate energy deployment into redundant tiers, ensuring fallback states under system failure. While this may pass the letter of the 2026 safety code, it also raises questions about whether McLaren is attempting to build performance-based redundancy, which the FIA has explicitly warned against in recent compliance bulletins. Even the car's weight distribution strategy is under examination. The leaked schematic included a dry mass breakdown showing an unusual 42-58 split rear biased beyond the expected standard. This might suggest McLaren is preparing to balance out energy recovery shifts with extra mass toward the rear axle, optimizing under-throttle rotation. But it could also signal instability at the front, potentially validating Piastri's earlier complaints about steering feedback degradation at high speed, especially in DRS zones. Finally, the leak revealed a partial view of a yet unannounced active ride height stabilization unit. Though the image didn't show the full mechanism, several paddock insiders believe McLaren may be testing a passively reactive hydraulic damping system, which adapts to aerodynamic load in real time without driver input. If this proves true, it could spark regulatory controversy. The FIA has stated that all active systems must be directly controlled and monitored, and anything that reacts automatically to aero pressure without declared logic could be grounds for disqualification. Inside McLaren's design office, the leak has triggered a crisis that goes far beyond PR. Overnight, every department involved in the 2026 car project was ordered to halt active development and shift into full damage assessment. Engineering leads from aerodynamics, chassis, powertrain, and control systems were pulled into emergency cross-team sessions to determine what in the leaked documents could be used against them either by rivals or by the FIA. Because the leak didn't just expose ideas. It exposed weaknesses. The aerodynamics team, already deep in finalizing the 2026 floor concept, has been forced to revalidate multiple elements, not because they're illegal yet, but because now that their shape and function are public, they may draw targeted FIA scrutiny. In modern Formula One, the legality of an innovation often depends on how visible it is. With every detail now online, McLaren knows they've lost the luxury of ambiguity. That means reworking the language, documentation, and justification for systems that were never meant to be challenged this early. On the chassis side, engineers are particularly concerned about the exposed battery spine layout. Internally, that decision had been controversial. Some saw it as a clever way to isolate thermal loads from the floor. Others worried it introduced new crash vulnerability and packaging strain. With the FIA now likely to test that structure more aggressively, especially under dynamic crash models, McLaren's structural team may be forced to redesign the entire midsection to guarantee compliance. And that is a multi-week setback they did not budget for. The power unit group is under its own strain. The leak showed parts of McLaren's revised cooling loop and inverter positioning, which appear unconventional. Rivals now have a rare window into their thermal management approach, knowledge that could narrow McLaren's advantage or raise accusations of stretching the 2026 packaging regulations. Engineers must now prepare to defend these placements, validate cooling rates under FIA thresholds, and show that no part of the layout violates minimum accessibility or safety standards. Perhaps most destabilizing is what's happening in the simulator department. Oscar Piastri's complaints about steering feedback, brake instability, and tire degradation were already causing concern. Now, engineers fear that some of the issues Piastri flagged may be tied to design elements shown in the leak, and worse, that the drivers were not fully informed about the latest concept changes. This has created a dangerous trust gap. If drivers feel blindsided, their confidence in the development process can collapse, and McLaren can't afford that with a regulation reset looming. Within the control systems team, the focus is now on software defensibility. The leaked override logic boxes suggest McLaren is using a tiered deployment system that may be interpreted as creating a soft advantage under failure conditions. That is exactly the kind of gray zone the FIA is trying to eliminate under the 2026 enforcement model. Engineers are now combing through every line of code, every logic tree, and every fail-safe parameter to ensure that nothing violates compliance, because in 2026, telemetry is truth. If the data doesn't match regulation, the car doesn't race. Across the board, what should have been a tightly controlled innovation cycle has turned into a survival test. The leak has created legal, technical, and political vulnerabilities. Every design feature is now under the spotlight. Every system must be defensible in writing. And every deadline just got tighter. McLaren's engineers are no longer just chasing performance, they are racing to preserve the credibility of the car itself. Because in Formula One, it's not enough to be fast. You have to be fast and invisible, and right now, McLaren is neither.